Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Thanks. I never used to believe in gut feelings. I was the type who needed logic, proof, a neat explanation before I gave something weight. But looking back, I realized that instinct, those moments where every fiber in your body screams, "Get out," are more real than any rational excuse you can muster. It happened 3 summers ago when I agreed to help a friend move across the country. At the time, I was still living in Chicago. I had a decent job working IT support at a small law firm, nothing fancy but steady enough to pay my rent and keep me afloat. My closest friend, Daniel Russo, had just landed a huge opportunity in Los Angeles, some corporate position with a salary that tripled what he was making here. It was the kind of offer you couldn't refuse. Daniel had been with his girlfriend Natalie for nearly 6 years. They were inseparable, one of those couples who shared every detail of their lives, even things most people would keep private. When he got the offer, she was fully on board. They decided to relocate together, planning a fresh start in California. The only snag? Daniel's dogs. 2 big ones, a 95-pound golden retriever named Copper and a shepherd mix named Luna. He didn't want to fly them, partly because they were too large and partly because Copper had hip issues that made flying risky. Plus, they were living in a hotel for their first month before moving into a rental house. Bringing the dogs straight away wasn't an option. So the plan was this. Once Daniel and Natalie got settled into their rental, I'd help transport the dogs from Chicago to Los Angeles. Daniel's younger sister, Marissa, also volunteered to come along, and another close buddy of ours, Aaron, decided to split the drive with me. Between the 3 of us, a near 30-hour trek didn't sound impossible. Hard, sure, but manageable. Daniel even joked before we left, "Just make sure Copper doesn't puke in your back seat and we're good." We left Chicago before dawn on a Thursday, the car packed tight with dog food, water bowls, luggage, and enough snacks to feed a football team. Aaron and I planned to split the majority of the driving, with Marissa taking over if either of us got too tired. For the first stretch, everything felt like a road trip adventure. Coffee stops, bad gas station food, Spotify playlists blaring. The dogs alternated between sticking their heads out the window and curling up to nap. By the time we reached Denver, fatigue was hitting. We booked a night at a La Quinta, and the dogs got their first real stretch of the legs. I remember lying in the stiff hotel bed, staring at the popcorn ceiling and thinking how odd it felt to be driving someone else's pets across the country. There was weight to it, responsibility. The next morning we pressed on. Utah's wide stretches of nothingness gave way to Arizona's dry heat, then Nevada's desert highways. Everything blurred into miles of road and heat ripples. But then came California. I had just finished a long driving shift and swapped places with Aaron. I slid into the passenger seat, phone in hand, scanning for the nearest gas station as we were running low. "Got about 20 miles left in the tank," Aaron said, tapping the fuel gauge. I spotted one on the GPS, a mobile station not far from us, marked near some small town called Barrow Creek. I told him to take the next exit. As we pulled off the interstate, I noticed the sign, Barrow Creek Historic District and gas. There was also a weathered billboard that read, "Visit the old mining town, just ahead." We rolled in on fumes. The station sat alone, a squat beige building with faded signage, a handful of cracked pumps, and a row of old cars parked haphazardly around the lot. Aaron parked beside a beat-up green sedan. A short, plump man wearing a baseball cap had just finished fueling his car and was walking toward the shop. "Dogs are asleep," Marissa said from the back. "Let's not wake them unless we have to." "Got it," I said, grabbing my wallet. "Anyone want anything?" "Red Gatorade," Aaron replied. "Marlboro Reds if they've got 'em," Marissa added. I nodded and swiped my card at the pump. First try, error. Second try, see attendant. Annoyed, I told Aaron, cards not reading. "I'll go inside." The moment I stepped through the door, I knew something was off. The store was silent. No background music, no hum of coolers, nothing. A few boxes of chips sat open on the floor like someone had been stocking shelves and just stopped. 6 cars were outside, but there wasn't a single customer inside. No cashier at the counter. No sound of footsteps. I waited, half expecting someone to emerge from a back office, but nothing. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the stillness. No answer. That's when it hit me. The man from the green sedan. I'd seen him heading inside just moments earlier. Where was he? The longer I stood there, the more uneasy I felt. My gut was screaming at me, "Leave. Right now." I turned toward the exit, forcing myself to move casually like I wasn't spooked. But every step felt heavy. I pushed open the door and saw our car about 25 yards away. Relief flooded me until movement caught my eye. From the side of the building, a different man appeared. Taller, heavier. His face twisted into a grin that didn't feel right. It was too wide, too deliberate, like someone imitating a smile without understanding why people smiled in the first place. I slowed my pace for half a second, then picked it back up. My chest was tight. My legs wanted to run. The man started walking toward me, not fast, but steady, his eyes locked on mine. "Shit," I muttered and broke into a near jog. When I reached the car, I yanked at the door handle. Locked. "Aaron!" I shouted, pounding on the window. "Open the fucking door!" The window rolled halfway down. "Dude, Copper's in your seat." I didn't let him finish. I shoved my arm through, grabbed Copper by the harness, and hauled him into the back. Marissa gasped, but I was already sliding into the seat. "Go! Drive! Now!" I barked. Aaron froze for a second, confused. "What? Just drive!" He stomped the pedal and we shot forward. I twisted in my seat, heart hammering. The man had stopped at the pump we'd been using, that grin still plastered across his face. We didn't speak for several miles. The silence in the car was suffocating, broken only by Copper's heavy breathing. Finally, Marissa asked, "What the hell just happened back there?" I told them everything. The empty store, the missing man, the grinning stranger. Both of them looked shaken, though Aaron tried to laugh it off. Maybe he worked there. Maybe he was going to help you with the pump. I shook my head. Number something was wrong. He wasn't a cashier. And where were the other people? We found another station 15 minutes down the road. This one bright, busy, full of families and truckers. I stayed outside while Aaron fueled up, scanning every face that walked by. When we got back on the interstate, we had no choice but to pass Barrow Creek again. My chest tightened as the station came into view. The same 6 cars sat in the exact same spots. Not one had moved. No people in sight. The lot looked frozen in time. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Hayes?" a woman asked. "This is Linda with your credit card company. We're calling to verify suspicious activity. Did you authorize a $100 charge at a mobile station in Barrow Creek, California?" I stared out the window. The blood drained from my face. "No," I whispered. "I didn't." She assured me the charge would be reversed, that fraud protection was in place, but I barely heard her. My mind was spinning. I hadn't even completed a transaction. How could they have charged me? We made it to Los Angeles without further issues. Daniel was waiting, ecstatic to see Copper and Luna. He laughed off our story about the creepy gas station, but Natalie looked uneasy. That night, lying awake in the Airbnb Daniel had rented for us, I couldn't shake the image of that man's grin, the stillness of the empty store, the cars that never left. It felt staged, like we had walked into something we weren't meant to see, something unfinished. To this day, I don't know what would have happened if I'd lingered inside just a little longer. But I know one thing. Instinct saved me, and sometimes logic has no place when your gut is screaming at you to run. I never thought much about staying in Airbnbs. They always seemed like a harmless convenience. Cheaper than hotels, more comfortable than roadside motels, and with the added charm of feeling like you were slipping into someone else's life for a few nights. I had used them half a dozen times before without a problem. That changed 2 summers ago. At the time, I was 26, single, and working as a freelance graphic designer in Chicago. The nature of my work meant I could work from anywhere, and I liked to take advantage of that freedom. When I felt myself slipping into burnout, I'd book a couple weeks somewhere different, Denver, Portland, Nashville, just to breathe new air and shake up my routine. That summer had been especially rough. Work was steady, but my personal life was unraveling. I'd just gotten out of a long-term relationship with a woman named Allison. The breakup wasn't explosive, no big betrayal, no screaming fights. But the quiet unraveling was almost worse. She'd grown tired of my constant stress. I'd grown resentful of her indifference, and one day she just said, "I think we're done." I hadn't realized how much space she'd occupied in my life until she was gone. The apartment felt too quiet, the days too long. My friends urged me to get away for a while. "Book somewhere," Aaron told me over beers. "Go somewhere with mountains or the ocean. You'll feel better." So I went online and started browsing Airbnbs. I wasn't picky, somewhere not too expensive, within driving distance, quiet enough that I could work if I needed to, but interesting enough that I wouldn't feel stuck. That's how I landed on a place in northern Wisconsin. It was a small guest house behind a larger cabin owned by a man named Vincent. The listing had only a few photos, an exterior shot, a small but clean kitchen, a bed with a quilt. The reviews were sparse but positive. "Private," one said. "Secluded," another wrote. Those were exactly the words I wanted to hear. I booked it for 10 days. The drive up was about 5 hours. The farther north I went, the denser the woods became, the more the air smelled like pine and damp earth. By the time I turned off onto the narrow gravel road that led to Vincent's property, I felt a calm I hadn't in months. The cabin appeared at the end of the road, a 2-story structure with a wraparound porch. Behind it, tucked into the trees, was the smaller guest house where I'd be staying. Vincent was waiting outside when I pulled up. He was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. Tall, with dark hair combed neatly back and a trimmed beard. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt like he'd dressed for company. When he smiled, it was warm, disarming even. "You must be Matthew," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Long drive?" "Not too bad," I replied. The roads were clear. Good, good. Well, welcome. I've got everything set up in the guest house for you. Keys are on the table inside. If you need anything, just knock. I'm usually around." His friendliness put me at ease. He gave me a quick tour. The guest house was simple but cozy. Small living room, kitchenette, bathroom, and a lofted bedroom. The windows looked out onto thick woods that seemed to stretch for miles. "This time of year," Vincent said, "you'll hear the owls at night. It gets real quiet up here. Peaceful." I smiled. That's exactly what I need. The first couple of days were uneventful in the best way. I spent mornings working on my laptop at the little kitchen table, afternoons walking the wooded trails Vincent said were safe, and evenings reading or streaming shows. The silence was deep but comforting. Vincent would occasionally stop by, sometimes just to ask if I needed anything, other times with small offerings, a plate of cookies, fresh towels, firewood for the pit out back. He was chatty but not intrusive. One evening he invited me to sit on his porch for a drink. "You don't strike me as the kind of guy who likes the city much," Vincent said, handing me a glass of whiskey. "It has its moments," I said, shrugging. "But yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating there. Out here you can breathe. Out here no one bothers you. It's like the world forgets you exist." The way he said it made something tighten in my chest, but he smiled afterward, and I forced myself to laugh. It was on the 4th night that things shifted. I woke up around 2 a.m. to use the bathroom. As I stepped down the loft ladder, I caught movement outside the window. At first, I thought it was a deer, but when I looked again, I saw a figure standing near the tree line. A man. He wasn't moving, just standing there facing the guest house. My stomach dropped. "Vincent," I whispered, though I knew he couldn't hear me. I stood frozen for what felt like minutes. Finally, I forced myself to move closer to the window. Just as I did, the figure turned and walked slowly back into the woods. I barely slept the rest of the night. The next morning, I casually brought it up while Vincent was chopping wood near his porch. "Hey, do you have neighbors out here?" I asked. "Not for a couple miles," he replied. "Why?" "I thought I saw someone in the woods last night, around 2 in the morning." Vincent paused mid-swing, then set the axe down. "Probably just a hunter passing through." "At 2 in the morning?" He smiled faintly. "Some people hunt at night. Don't worry about it." Something in the way he said it unsettled me, but I nodded and pretended to accept the explanation. 2 nights later, Vincent invited me over for dinner. He grilled steaks, poured generous glasses of red wine, and we ate on his porch as the sun went down. Midway through the meal, he asked, "You ever collect anything?" "Not really," I said. "Why?" "I want to show you something." He disappeared inside and returned with a wooden box. When he opened it, I felt my stomach clench. Inside was a collection of knives. Hunting knives, combat knives, folding blades. Each one gleamed in the fading light. "Beautiful, aren't they?" Vincent said, running his finger along one of the blades. "Each one has a story." I forced a smile. "Yeah, they're impressive." He looked at me intently. "They haven't broken skin yet, but someday, maybe, when the right story comes along." I laughed nervously, hoping he was joking, but his eyes didn't match the smile on his face. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the guest house set me on edge. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside, slow, deliberate. I crept to the window. Vincent was standing near the porch steps, looking up at my loft window. Smiling, adrenaline surged through me. I grabbed my phone, but there was no service. I backed away from the window, heart pounding. A few minutes later, the footsteps retreated. The silence that followed was worse. The next morning, I told Vincent I needed to cut my trip short. "Family emergency," I lied. He just nodded, too calmly. "That's a shame," he said. "I thought we were just starting to get to know each other." I packed quickly, loaded the car, and drove off. My hands shook the whole way down the gravel road. I didn't stop until I reached a small town with cell service. When I finally pulled into a gas station, my phone buzzed with missed notifications. One was from Airbnb. "Your host Vincent has canceled your reservation for the remaining nights. No explanation, just canceled." A week later, out of curiosity, I checked the listing again. It was gone. I don't know what Vincent's story was. I don't know what might have happened if I'd stayed longer. But I do know the way he smiled up at my window, the way he showed me those knives, the way he said no one would bother me out there. It didn't feel like kindness. It felt like a warning. I haven't stayed in an Airbnb since. I never really believed in the word pretty. Not when it came to me, anyway. All my life, people had other names for me. Names that stuck to my skin like labels I couldn't peel off. In middle school, they called me Frog Eyes because my eyes were large and uneven. By high school, it became Pout Mouth, or worse, Lava Lips, because my lips were full, wide, and tilted at one side. Some teachers pretended not to hear the whispers, but I always noticed the glances, the smirks, the way people avoided sitting near me as if my face alone carried a disease. At home, it wasn't much better. My cousins, my uncles, even my older brother would throw little digs. "No one's ever going to chase after you, Nora," my brother once said, half laughing, half cruel. My mother was the only one who occasionally tried to reassure me, telling me, "Your eyes are a gift, Nor. They see things other people don't. Someday someone will notice." But I didn't believe her. I couldn't. So when I walked into my first psychology lecture at Ridgewood University, a nervous 18-year-old with a thrift store hoodie and shaky hands gripping a second-hand notebook, the last thing I expected was for anyone to notice me, let alone him. His name was Ethan Calloway. He slid into the empty seat beside me with an easy grin, his coffee steaming in one hand, his spiral-bound notebook in the other. His cologne carried this faint woodsy scent, not overpowering but enough to make me aware of him in a way I wasn't used to being aware of anyone. "Hi," he said, setting his coffee down. "I'm Ethan. You're pretty." I froze. I wanted to laugh, maybe roll my eyes, maybe even spit back something defensive like, "Do you wear those lines out on everyone?" But instead I just blinked at him, muttered, "I'm Nora," and turned away. Pretty. The word burned my ears. He had to be joking. But Ethan didn't stop. The next class he showed up again. Same seat, same grin. A coffee, this time with a second cup. He slid toward me. "Black, no sugar," he said. I guessed. I stared at it. What if I don't like black coffee? Then I'll figure it out next time. Every time he called me pretty, a knot inside me twisted tighter. I smiled on the outside. What else could I do? But inside, I felt like a cracked vase being complimented for its shine. Weeks went by. Ethan didn't just sit beside me. He walked me to the library. He offered me his notes. He made stupid jokes in the margins of my notebook when I forgot to guard it. And always, always, he repeated, "You're pretty." At first, I dismissed him as persistent. Then little by little, I began to believe him. I started changing. Not for me, for him. I bought new clothes, the kind I saw the other girls in our class wearing. I spent hours in front of the mirror trying to shrink my lips with makeup, contouring my face, adjusting my hair to fall just so. I even ordered contacts online to replace my thick glasses. When Ethan noticed, his smile widened like the sun. "You've got amazing eyes," he murmured once, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Like galaxies." Galaxies. My mom had said something like that once. For the first time, I wondered if maybe she had been right. Soon, Ethan wasn't just giving me coffee. He was leaving flowers on my desk, scribbling notes like lunch or movie night. I told myself I was cautious, but the truth was I was falling for him faster than I'd ever fallen for anyone. And when he finally slipped me a folded piece of paper, his neat handwriting asking, "Will you be my girlfriend?" I couldn't breathe. I wanted to say yes. Every nerve in my body screamed for it, but my mouth said no. He stared at me, hurt flickering across his features. "Why not?" I swallowed hard. I don't want to be labeled. I don't want to be the ugly girlfriend in your group." He laughed gently, reaching for my hand. "Nora, you're not ugly. You're beautiful. And if anyone thinks otherwise, screw them." But the whispers in my head were louder than his voice. I walked away. Except Ethan didn't give up. Days later, he cornered me outside the lecture hall. "You're not getting rid of me that easily," he said with a grin. "I meant it, Nora. I like you, and I'm not going anywhere." And I gave in. That was the start of us. For a while, it was perfect. Ethan kissed me in public, held my hand in front of others, carried my bag, left me notes saying he loved my smile, my laugh, my clumsy handwriting. But then came the night that shattered everything. I told him I was sick, just a mild fever, and that I'd skip class. He showed up at my apartment with medicine, soup, and that lopsided grin. He kissed my forehead, tucked me into bed, whispered, "Rest, pretty girl," before leaving. I should have stayed home. I should have slept. But something inside me wanted to surprise him. So I dressed, dragged myself to class, and slipped in through the back door. That's when I heard it. Ethan's friend, loud, mocking, called out, "Hey, your ugly girl's not here today." And Ethan laughed. I froze. "Yeah," he said, smirking. "Biggie's sick. At least I get a break from kissing those lips today." Laughter rippled through the group. My stomach dropped. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. I ran before anyone could see me. That night, he broke up with me. His words were sharp, cruel, tearing through every fragile wall I'd built. He admitted it had been a joke, a bet, something to make his friends laugh. I thought my chest would cave in. For days, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My room was a graveyard of tissues and empty coffee cups. I wanted to vanish, to dissolve into the shadows of the walls. And then the news broke. Ethan Calloway, found dead at the bottom of Haven Ridge Cliff, his body shattered on the rocks below. Police called it an accident, slipped while hiking, maybe drunk. But when I read it, something inside me shifted. I remembered my Chihuahua Maxie when I was 9, how he died the night before my cousin left town after bonding with him. How strange it felt, like he couldn't bear the separation. I remembered my best friend Lily, who promised to write me every week after moving away, but died in a car accident on the highway before she ever sent a single letter. Now Ethan, all of them, people I loved, people who left. And deep down, I felt something that terrified me. Joy. Because maybe this was justice. Maybe the universe had a way of punishing those who made me love them only to abandon me. When I looked at my reflection that night, my crooked lips curved into a smile I didn't recognize. Ugly lips, they called them. But now, they looked powerful. Because anyone who hurt me, anyone who dared to call me ugly, anyone who thought they could leave would pay. Just like Ethan. And for the first time, I whispered the word out loud to my own reflection. Pretty. I never thought that booking a weekend getaway could spiral into something that would haunt me for years. At the time, all I wanted was a small escape. Something quiet, away from the city, away from work, and away from the constant noise of life that never seemed to stop. For some context, I had just turned 22, juggling my part-time college schedule with a job at a small coffee shop in San Antonio. Life in the city was draining, and though I had friends, I often felt strangely isolated. My mom used to tell me I was too trusting for my own good, but I never thought much of it. I'd always believed that people at their core were decent. That belief was about to change. It was late September when I booked the Airbnb. The semester had just started, my professors already loading us with assignments, and I felt the walls of my apartment closing in on me. I needed air, fresh, quiet, unbothered air. Scrolling late one night on the Airbnb app, I found it. Rustic cabin on private land, perfect for a quiet stay. The photos showed a one-bedroom cabin tucked into what looked like a wooded area outside a small town called Marwood, about 2 hours from the city. The pictures were charming. Warm lighting, wood-paneled walls, a small front porch with 2 rocking chairs. The listing said it was hosted by a man named Eric. His profile had just one other review from a guest who wrote, "Lovely place, very private, would recommend." That was enough for me. I clicked reserve. When I told my best friend Maya about the trip, she frowned. "You're really going by yourself?" she asked, tucking a strand of curly hair behind her ear. "Yeah, why not?" I laughed. "I just need to recharge a little. It's only for 2 nights. Maya raised an eyebrow. "You watch true crime all the time, and you're telling me you don't see anything sketchy about driving to some random cabin owned by some random guy you've never met?" I waved her off. "I'll be fine. It's just a cabin. Besides, I'll share my location with you. You'll know if I disappear." She didn't laugh. The drive to Marwood was beautiful in its own lonely way. The further I got from San Antonio, the more the landscape stretched into flat, dry fields dotted with trees, and the more the radio gave way to static. I rolled the windows down and let the warm air whip through the car, trying to feel the sense of freedom I'd been craving. By the time I reached the town, the sun was dipping low, the sky awash in orange and purple streaks. Marwood itself looked like something frozen in the past. An old gas station, a diner with a faded sign, and a single stoplight that blinked yellow at an empty intersection. My GPS guided me down a winding dirt road outside of town. I passed nothing but trees for miles, my phone signal dropping until it showed no service. Finally, the cabin came into view. It was smaller than the picture suggested, the wood siding darker and weathered, but it still looked inviting in the last light of day. There was even a lantern glowing faintly on the porch. I parked my car, grabbed my duffel bag, and headed up the steps. The key was exactly where the instructions said it would be, inside a small lockbox near the door. When I stepped inside, I felt that immediate coziness the pictures had promised. Wooden floors, a small fireplace, a sofa with a knitted blanket draped across it. It smelled faintly of cedar and something else. Something metallic, though I brushed it off. A handwritten note sat on the table. "Welcome, Leah. Hope you enjoy your stay. I live in the house at the far end of the property if you need anything. Eric." I remember smiling at that. It felt personal, almost reassuring. The first night was uneventful, though I couldn't shake the silence. Out here it was a silence so complete it felt heavy, pressing into my ears. In the city, even at 3 a.m. you'd hear something. Sirens, cars, voices. Here there was nothing but the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. I microwaved some leftovers I'd brought, curled up on the couch with a book, and eventually drifted off to sleep. But sometime after midnight, I woke up. It was faint at first, just a creak, like someone stepping on an old wooden board. My eyes snapped open. The sound wasn't inside the room, but just outside, near the porch. I held my breath, straining to listen. Another creak, then nothing. For the next half hour, I lay frozen in bed, staring at the ceiling, telling myself it was probably an animal. Eventually, I forced myself back to sleep. The next morning, I stepped outside to drink my coffee on the porch. That's when I saw him. A man stood at the edge of the trees, maybe 50 yards away, his posture still, his figure partly shadowed. I blinked, adjusting my eyes. He was tall, maybe in his 30s, wearing a dark hoodie despite the heat. Hello?" I called out, trying to sound casual. The man didn't move, didn't wave, didn't respond. I felt a chill creep up my spine. I took a cautious step back toward the door. "Can I help you?" Finally, he turned slowly and disappeared into the woods. My heart pounded in my chest. Was that Eric? Was that just some hiker? I went back inside, locking the door behind me. Later that afternoon, I decided to walk to the main house. I wanted to make sure everything was okay, and also, maybe to confirm that the guy I saw wasn't Eric. The path wound through trees until the main house came into view. It was bigger than the cabin, but old, paint peeling from the siding, shutters hanging slightly crooked. I knocked on the door. After a long pause, it opened. A man stepped out. He was maybe late 30s, clean-shaven, wearing a flannel shirt. His smile seemed polite, but his eyes, they lingered too long. "You must be Leah," he said. His voice was calm, but something about it felt forced. "Yeah," I replied, trying to sound cheerful. "I just wanted to thank you for the cabin. It's really nice." He nodded. "Glad you like it. Everything working okay?" "Yes, I just thought I saw someone near the property this morning, a man in a hoodie. Do you know if anyone else lives nearby?" Eric's smile faltered. This land is private. No one else should be out here." I swallowed. Right. Must have been my imagination. But his eyes lingered on me in a way that made my skin crawl. That night, the noises came again. This time, it wasn't just creaking. It was footsteps. Clear, deliberate footsteps circling the cabin. I froze in bed, every muscle tense, gripping the small pocket knife I always kept in my bag. The sound would pause, then start again on the other side of the cabin. At one point, I swore I heard breathing. Slow, heavy breathing right outside my bedroom window. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to my car and drive until my lungs stopped burning. But my body wouldn't move. Hours passed before the sounds finally stopped. I didn't sleep. By morning, I was done. I decided to cut the trip short and leave. I stuffed my clothes back into my bag, grabbed my keys, and opened the door. That's when I saw him. The man in the hoodie stood at the bottom of the porch steps, his face shadowed, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Fear surged through me. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling. He tilted his head slightly, then, in a low voice, he said, "You're really pretty. You shouldn't be here alone." Before I could react, he lunged up the steps. His hands shot toward my neck, squeezing tight, cutting off my air. I clawed at his arms, the world spinning, spots clouding my vision. Instinct took over. My hand shot to my pocket, yanking out the knife. I slashed wildly, catching his arm. He screamed, a guttural, animalistic sound, and stumbled back, clutching the wound. I bolted. I ran to my car, my hands shaking so violently I dropped the keys twice before shoving them into the ignition. The tires kicked up gravel as I sped down the dirt road, tears blurring my vision. When I finally got service again, I called the police. My voice broke as I told them everything, every detail. They searched the property but found nothing, no sign of the man in the hoodie. Eric claimed he hadn't seen or heard anything unusual. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep without jolting awake at every creak, every shadow. I kept replaying the feel of his hands around my throat, the sound of his voice. The police never found him, and I never booked another Airbnb again. Even now, sometimes, when I'm alone in my apartment at night, I swear I hear footsteps outside my window. Slow, deliberate, waiting. I never thought booking an Airbnb for a weekend trip could end up changing the way I look at strangers, houses, and even myself. At the time, I was 23, a senior in college, stressed out with finals and desperate for a short escape. My name is Daniel Ortiz, and I grew up in a small city called Fairgrove, Texas. It wasn't much, some chain restaurants, one Walmart, and streets that felt empty after 9 p.m. By spring of 2019, I had been living in Austin for school, but Fairgrove was still where my parents lived, and where I came back whenever I wanted to feel grounded. The problem was, Fairgrove had nothing to offer in terms of peace. My parents fought constantly, loud, bitter fights that carried through the walls. If it wasn't that, it was my younger brother throwing parties when he wasn't supposed to, inviting people I didn't even know into the house. So when I started browsing Airbnb for a cheap getaway, I wasn't looking for anything fancy, just something quiet. Something to make me feel like I wasn't suffocating. That's how I found it. A small guest house listed in a rural town called Ashford, about 40 minutes outside Austin. The pictures made it look warm, almost charming. An older brick home with ivy creeping up one wall, a detached guest house that had been converted into a small rental. The listing said, "Quiet stay near the woods. Perfect for writers, travelers, or couples wanting privacy. Host lives in the main house if you need anything." The host's name was Eleanor Price. She looked to be in her early 50s in her profile picture, with silver-streaked hair tied back, wearing glasses and a faded blue sweater. The reviews were mixed. Most people said it was peaceful, clean, and affordable. But a few reviews stood out. One simply read, "Strange vibes. Left early." Another. Eleanor was nice enough, but something about the place didn't feel right. I should have listened. It was a Friday afternoon when I drove down the narrow road into Ashford. The further I went, the quieter it got. Gas stations turned into fields, fields into stretches of forest. My GPS instructed me to turn down a cracked 2-lane road, and eventually I pulled up to the address. The property looked just like the pictures, maybe a little older, a little more worn. The main house sat farther back, partially hidden behind tall oak trees. The guest house was closer to the gravel driveway, painted a dull gray with a slanted roof. Eleanor was already outside when I pulled up. She waved at me like she had been waiting. "Daniel?" she called. "Yes, that's me," I said, grabbing my backpack from the car. She walked over, smiling. Up close, she looked tired, her skin pale, her smile slightly forced. "Welcome. I don't usually host young men by themselves," she said with a chuckle, though something in her tone felt odd. I laughed nervously. Yeah, I just needed some peace and quiet for the weekend. Her eyes lingered on me for a moment, like she was trying to read more than I was saying. Then she nodded. "Well, you'll certainly get that here." She showed me inside the guest house. It was small but tidy. A single bed, a little kitchenette, an old wooden desk, and a bathroom with a shower. The windows looked out toward the forest. "There's no TV, but the Wi-Fi works most of the time," she said. "If you need anything, I'm in the main house." I thanked her, and she left me to settle in. For a while, it was exactly what I wanted. Quiet. The air smelled like pine. I could hear birds instead of my parents fighting. But it didn't take long for things to feel off. That night, I sat at the desk, scrolling on my laptop. Around midnight, I heard something, light footsteps outside the window. At first I thought maybe it was a deer or raccoon, but the sound was too steady, too slow. I froze, listening. The steps circled the guest house once, then stopped. I pulled back the curtain just a little, but the outside light barely reached the trees. All I saw was dark. The next morning I mentioned it casually to Eleanor when I bumped into her on my way to the car. "Do you get animals walking around at night?" I asked. She tilted her head. "Animals? Not usually. Why?" I hesitated. I thought I heard footsteps outside my place. Her smile was quick but tight. "Oh, probably nothing. These woods play tricks on you when you're not used to them." Something about the way she said that stuck with me. On Saturday afternoon, I wandered the property a little. The main house was much bigger up close, old but well-maintained, with thick curtains drawn across every window. On the side of the house, I noticed a door leading to what looked like a basement. I don't know why I even tried it. Maybe I was just curious. The handle rattled, but didn't turn. Locked. A few minutes later, Eleanor appeared from around the corner carrying a basket of laundry. "Looking for something?" she asked, her voice calm but her eyes sharp. I stepped back. "Oh no, just walking around, sorry." Her smile returned, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That part of the house isn't for guests." That night I dreamed of the locked door. I dreamed I could hear something moving underneath the house. Breathing. Sunday evening, my last night, I was sitting on the bed reading when I heard it again. Footsteps outside. Slow. Deliberate. This time, instead of freezing, I grabbed the small pocket knife I always carried. My heart pounded as I stepped toward the window. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then suddenly the doorknob rattled. Someone was trying to get in. I shouted, "Who's there?" No answer. Just more rattling, harder this time. Adrenaline surged through me. I bolted to the door, bracing my shoulder against it. "I'm calling the police," I yelled. The rattling stopped. Silence again. For a moment I thought it was over. Then from outside the window a face appeared. Pale, smiling. It was Eleanor. She tapped the glass gently, almost playfully. "Daniel," she whispered, "why don't you come stay in the main house tonight? It's safer." My stomach dropped. Everything in me screamed no. "I'm leaving," I said, grabbing my bag. Her smile faded. Her eyes hardened. For a second, she didn't move. Then she whispered, "You should have never come here." I didn't wait. I ran out the door, sprinted to my car, and peeled out of the driveway so fast gravel spit against the trees. I didn't stop driving until I was back in Austin. I sat in a gas station parking lot, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. When I reported it to Airbnb and the local police, nothing came of it. The police said there wasn't enough evidence of a crime. Airbnb refunded me but kept the listing active. A few weeks later, I checked again. The guest house was still listed. New reviews had popped up. One said, "Eleanor was sweet, but I swear I heard someone trying my door at night. Didn't sleep well." Another, "Left early. Not coming back." I don't know what's in that basement or why Eleanor smiled the way she did. But I know this. I'll never stay at an Airbnb alone again. Even now, years later, I dream about that face in the window, the way she whispered my name. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear footsteps outside my apartment. Slow, steady, waiting. I never thought I'd be the type of person to book a week alone in the countryside, but that's exactly what I did in the fall of 2021. My name is Emily Carter, and at the time I was 24, burnt out from the endless grind of my marketing job in Dallas. I'd been juggling deadlines, toxic clients, and an on-again, off-again relationship that left me feeling like I was suffocating. One Friday night, after another fight with my then-boyfriend, I found myself scrolling through Airbnb listings. Most were cute apartments in Austin or New Orleans, but my eyes caught on one. Rustic farmhouse guest cabin, secluded, peaceful, with trails and starry skies. The photos were simple. A little one-bedroom cabin, old wood but renovated inside, tucked off a gravel road. The listing said it was on the host's property, about 50 yards from the main house, but completely private. The caption promised tranquility, hiking trails, and a true escape from city noise. It was in Belridge, Oklahoma, a tiny countryside town I had never heard of. The reviews were glowing. People mentioned how kind the host, Martha, was. A retired teacher, apparently. Guests said she baked cookies for them, told them stories of the town, and made them feel at home. On impulse, I booked it for 6 nights. The drive from Dallas to Belridge was 5 hours of long highways and flat fields. By the time I turned off onto the smaller roads, the sun was low, stretching shadows across the fields. The cabin was tucked down a gravel road lined with barbed wire fences. My GPS lost signal a mile before I arrived, and I had to rely on the handwritten directions Martha had emailed me. Her farmhouse appeared first. White paint chipping, a big front porch with 2 rocking chairs and wind chimes that tinkled in the breeze. The cabin was set back, nestled under oak trees. It looked exactly like the pictures, small, cozy, welcoming. Martha greeted me on the porch. She was in her late 60s, gray hair tied back in a braid, wearing jeans and a flannel. She had that warm, grandmotherly presence. "Emily, honey, you made it just before dark," she said, waving me over. I smiled, instantly relieved. The drive was long, but I'm glad to be here. "Well, you've got the whole place to yourself. Come by the house if you need anything. Extra towels, food, directions. Don't be shy." I thanked her, grabbed my bag, and settled into the cabin. Inside, it smelled of cedar wood. There was a tiny kitchen, a small sofa, and a queen bed with a handmade quilt. A welcome basket sat on the counter, cookies, bottled water, and a handwritten note. "Enjoy your stay. You're safe here. Martha." That last line, "You're safe here," struck me as odd, but I brushed it off. Probably just her way of being comforting. I sat on the porch that night with a mug of tea, listening to crickets and the distant rustle of leaves. The stars were brighter than I'd ever seen them. Then I noticed a man standing by the fence line. At first I thought I imagined it. But no, there he was, about 50 yards away on the other side of the fence. A tall man, maybe in his 40s, wearing a ball cap. He wasn't moving, just standing there, watching. I froze. After a moment, he raised a hand like a half wave. Not friendly, not unfriendly, just acknowledgement. Then he turned and walked back toward the trees. My skin prickled. The next morning, I mentioned it to Martha when I walked over to ask about hiking trails. "Oh, that's probably Walter," she said casually. "He's my neighbor. His family's lived on the land next to mine for generations. He's harmless, just keeps to himself mostly. Sometimes he walks the fence line." "Does he usually watch your guests?" I asked, half joking. Martha chuckled. "Walter's old-fashioned. Doesn't see a lot of new faces around here, don't mind him." I nodded, but unease lingered. Over the next couple days, I settled into a rhythm. Morning walks, reading on the porch, cooking simple meals. But Walter's presence kept cropping up. On the second evening, I was walking back from Martha's house with a plate of leftover pie when I heard crunching gravel behind me. I turned, and there he was, Walter, walking slowly down the road, hands in his pockets. "Evenin'," he said. His voice was deep, rough. "Hi," I replied, clutching the plate a little tighter. "You're staying in Martha's cabin, huh?" "Yeah, just for the week." He nodded, eyes scanning me in a way that made my stomach knot. "Don't see many young women out here alone." "I just needed a getaway," I said, forcing a polite smile. He smiled back, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Well, careful out here after dark. Lot of things in these woods." Then he walked past me, slow, deliberate, almost brushing my shoulder, though there was plenty of room. I hurried inside, locked the door, and didn't step out again that night. By the 4th night, my nerves were frayed. Every creak of the cabin set me on edge. I kept the curtains closed, but I swore I heard footsteps outside around midnight. Gravel crunching, twigs snapping. The next morning, I confronted Martha. "Does Walter ever come onto your property?" I asked carefully. Martha frowned. "He shouldn't." "Why?" I hesitated. I've just seen him around a lot, near the cabin at night. She sighed. Walter's lonely. His wife passed a few years back. He can be overly curious. But if he bothers you, I'll have a word with him. I wanted to believe her. But that night, things escalated. It was around 11 p.m. I was in bed scrolling my phone when I heard the unmistakable sound of the cabin's porch steps creaking. My blood ran cold. I turned off my phone screen and listened. A soft tap-tap on the window followed. My chest tightened, then a voice, low, muffled through the glass. "Emily, you awake?" "Walter." I froze, not daring to breathe. The doorknob rattled, slow at first, then harder. "Emily, I just want to talk," he said. His tone was almost gentle, which made it more terrifying. I grabbed my phone, whispering to Siri to call 911, but there was no service. My stomach dropped. The rattling turned into pounding. Then, silence. I thought he'd left. But suddenly glass shattered, the small kitchen window. A hand reached through, fumbling for the latch. Adrenaline surged. I yanked open the drawer, grabbed the pocket knife I always carried, and shouted, "Get the hell out!" The hand froze. Then Walter's face appeared in the window, twisted with rage. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he hissed. I lunged forward, slashing the knife across his forearm. He howled, pulling back. Blood smeared on the window frame. I bolted out the front door barefoot, sprinting toward Martha's house. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't stop. I banged on her door, sobbing. She flung it open, eyes wide, and pulled me inside. "What happened?" she cried. He tried to break in. Walter," I gasped. Martha locked the door, called the sheriff. By the time deputies arrived, Walter was gone. They found blood outside the cabin window, his footprints leading back toward his property. "He won't bother you again," one of them assured me. "We'll have a word with him. Might press charges." But something in his tone told me this wasn't the first time. I cut my trip short, left the next morning, hands trembling on the wheel as I drove back to Dallas. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep without checking my windows 3 times. I kept pepper spray in my bag, a knife in my glove compartment. My boyfriend, ex now, said I was paranoid, but he didn't see Walter's eyes that night. I still think about Martha, whether she's safe living next to him. And sometimes, late at night, I wake up convinced I hear that voice at my window again, whispering, "Emily, you awake?" I've always been the kind of person who thought too much about my own life when the city went quiet at night. I'd sit in my small apartment with the hum of traffic faint through the thin windows and realize how much of my early 20s had slipped through my fingers without me noticing. When my relationship ended, 3 years with someone who decided they wanted something else, I promised myself I'd get out, at least for a little while. Not out forever, not some dramatic escape, just out of the city, somewhere remote, somewhere where silence wasn't broken by sirens or late-night drunks yelling outside the bar, a place where I could sit and figure out if the person I was turning into was someone I even wanted to be. So when I found the Airbnb listing, it felt like a sign. The photos showed a small 2-story stone house, tucked off a dirt road in the countryside of Bridgeley, a rural town 2 hours outside of the city. It looked old, but cared for. Green shutters, a sloping roof, a porch with wooden rocking chairs. Behind it stretched acres of wild grass fields and woods that seemed to swallow the horizon. The host's description was warm but vague. "Come experience peace and privacy. A historic countryside home perfect for writers, artists, or anyone who needs to recharge. Minimal cell service, but Wi-Fi provided. Please respect the land." That last sentence struck me as odd. Respect the land. But I brushed it off. Maybe the host was one of those eco-minded types. I booked it for a week. When I pulled off the main highway and followed the long, winding country roads, I felt the city fall off my shoulders piece by piece. My old Honda Civic rumbled along cracked asphalt and dirt patches, and I rolled the windows down to let in the sharp country air. The directions eventually took me down a narrow gravel lane lined with leaning fence posts. It was quiet in a way that made my ears buzz. The house was just like the photos. Old stone, ivy creeping up one side, the kind of place that had history in its bones. There was a car in the driveway, a dark green pickup with mud splashed up the sides. I parked behind it and grabbed my bag, expecting to meet the host. Instead, a man came from the property next door, or at least what looked like next door. His house was a good stretch across a field, close enough to see but far enough that I hadn't noticed it until he stepped outside. He was in his late 50s, stocky with a weathered face and graying beard. He walked with that deliberate, heavy-footed pace of someone who wasn't in a rush for anything. "You must be the renter," he called out, voice deep, carrying over the gravel. "Yeah," I said, shifting my bag on my shoulder. "I'm staying here for the week. Is Ellen around? She's the host, right?" His eyes lingered on me longer than felt natural. Then he gave a curt shake of his head. "She ain't here. Went to visit her sister. I look after things when she's gone." "Oh," I forced a smile. "Got it. I'll just let myself in then." The man walked closer, close enough that I caught the smell of tobacco and earth clinging to him. "Name's Walter," he said. "I'm next property over. If you need anything, well, don't. Best to just mind your business out here. Keep to yourself. It's quieter that way." It wasn't exactly neighborly, but I nodded. "Sure, thanks." Walter's gaze flicked to the house, then back to me. Something sharp passed through his eyes, but it was gone before I could name it. He turned and walked back toward his place without another word. I stood there for a moment unsettled before I shook it off and let myself into the Airbnb. The house smelled faintly of cedar and something older, like books and dust. It was charming, though. Wood floors that creaked under my steps, a stone fireplace, mismatched furniture that looked like it had been collected over decades. Upstairs were 2 bedrooms. I chose the one with a wide window facing the field. There were little touches that made the place feel like someone still lived there, not just a rental. A knitted blanket draped over the couch, a framed photograph of a woman, Ellen, presumably, with her arm around an older woman who looked like her mother. And then there were the rules. On the kitchen counter sat a handwritten note. "Welcome. Please treat this home with care." A few reminders. "Respect the land. Do not wander past the tree line after dark. Keep all doors locked at night. If you hear knocking, do not answer immediately. Wait until morning." I stared at that last line for a long time. If you hear knocking. What the hell kind of rule was that? I laughed nervously to myself, setting it down. Probably some local superstition. Rural towns always had them. The first day passed quietly. I unpacked, took a walk through the field behind the house, cooked myself some pasta in the outdated but functional kitchen, and read a few chapters of a book I'd been meaning to start. By the time night fell, the silence pressed against me differently. The kind of silence that wasn't empty. It was thick, alive. My phone barely had a signal, just enough to send a text that said, "Made it here safe." No service really, so don't worry if I go quiet. I sat on the porch with a beer and stared at the tree line as the last light drained from the sky. The woods looked blacker than any I'd ever seen, like they could swallow light whole. When I finally went inside, I locked the doors, because why not follow the rules, and curled up in bed. At around 2 in the morning, I woke to the sound of something. Knock, knock, knock. It was slow, deliberate, coming from the front door. I froze. Every hair on my body stood on end. I remembered the rule instantly. If you hear knocking, do not answer immediately. Wait until morning. My first thought was Walter. Maybe he needed something, but at 2 in the morning, knock, knock. The sound didn't change pace, just steady, patient, like whoever it was could wait all night. I sat there in bed, heart pounding, barely breathing. It went on for maybe 5 minutes, though it felt like an eternity before it stopped. Silence returned, heavier than before. Somehow I fell back asleep. The next morning I stepped outside, squinting against the bright sun. The front step looked undisturbed. No footprints in the dirt. Walter was in his yard chopping wood. I hesitated before walking over. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. Weird question, but were you at my door last night?" He didn't stop swinging the axe. He brought it down hard into a log, splitting it clean in two, then looked at me. "No." I nodded, shifting uncomfortably. "Right. Just thought I heard something." Walter stared at me for a long moment, then said, "If you're smart, you won't open that door after dark. No matter what you hear." A chill crawled up my spine. "What does that mean?" "Means what it means," he muttered, turning back to his wood. I stood there, waiting for him to elaborate, but he didn't. He just kept chopping, each thud of the axe punctuating the silence between us. The days blurred. I tried to relax, to focus on myself, but the nights undid everything. The knocking came again the next night, and the one after that, always around the same time, always the same slow, patient rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. I never answered. I followed the rule, even though curiosity burned inside me. But on the fourth night, something changed. Instead of knocking, I heard a voice, software almost pleading. "Let me in." It wasn't Walter's voice. It wasn't Ellen's either. Not that I'd met her, but I'd seen her photo. This voice was wrong, too smooth, too calm. "Let me in." I pressed my hands over my ears, heart racing. The voice continued for what felt like hours. Then finally silence. By the sixth night, I was unraveling. I hadn't slept properly in days. My nerves were shot. That night, the knocking started again. Louder this time, more insistent. Then came the voice. "Open the door!" My breath caught. "Open the door, I know you hear me." I wanted to scream. Instead, I grabbed the baseball bat I'd found in the closet and crept downstairs. I didn't open the door, but I looked through the peephole. There was no one there, just the empty porch. And yet the knocking continued. I stumbled back, shaking. "What the hell do you want?" I shouted. The knocking stopped. Then in the silence came a whisper, right against the wood, as if someone's lips were pressed to it. "You." I didn't wait until morning. I packed my bag in a frenzy, threw it in my car, and peeled out of that gravel driveway like my life depended on it. As I drove down the long country road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Walter was standing in his yard watching me leave, and for just a second I thought I saw someone standing on the porch of the Airbnb. Someone tall, still, head tilted unnaturally to the side. I didn't look back again. I never contacted Ellen, never left a review. I deleted the confirmation email from my inbox and swore I'd never return to Bridgeley. Because now, whenever I close my eyes, I still hear it. Knock, knock, knock. And I know one day, if I'm not careful, I'll answer.